Hello, today I'm joined with Dr. Angel from angelsanimals.com. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to chat with you today.
Yes, and I thought it's wonderful to have you in this session because we would like to talk today about the reflex point on the horse's body hit by equipment, what causes negative points. And I thought we're going to break it up in 6 sessions, and rather than talking about all the 14s. So I would like to start today by seeing a common pattern, what we haven't seen for hundreds and hundreds of years, which is that the equipment failed to give the spine enough room to stay away from those reflex points, from the areas what causes horses back. I have a great friend in Europe, and he belongs to a saddle historian club, and himself was 76 years old, is the youngest of all of them. And he also wrote a part of my book about saddle history. And you can see here's just a section what I photographed, where he says 7,000 years of development and optimization of the relationship between man, horse, and saddle. So obviously they always had concern how the saddle fits the horse and where it should sit and shouldn't sit. And even in the cavalry, they have, or army, they have made the soldiers to learn the area where and how the pad has to be folded and how the army packing or simple working saddle has to fit. So they called it mapping of the horse. I find it fascinating. And by mapping out the horse, they of course also want to teach the young soldiers and themselves as find out where the saddle should sit and how and where should you sit on the horse. How and where is a big key factors. And when we look at today's science and all this wonderful equipment we have to our fingertips today, anybody who works with horses and equipment, this is readily available on the internet, right? And some books go really into detail. And as I said, today we want to talk about these 6 spinal problems. And I chose to start today with this because we see how people sit on a horse, and we have different disciplines. But when we go way back to the time when horses were needed and a necessity, not just a pleasure, we were learning how to ride so we are light on the horse and do not impede with the movement of the horse. Mm-hmm. So you can see here's old pictures of when we stand, we have shoulder, hips, and heels one line. And when we sit on the horse, the only difference is standing, we have the weight on our seat bones. Standing, we have the weight on our feet. And when we sit, our weight is on our seat bones. But we still have that plumb line that goes to the heel. So from the side, we don't really want to change too much what the rider's natural and balanced position is. From the front, you want to imagine you're floating down on a barrel down the river. And who all has ever tried to sit on something round on the water, maybe not in the river, but maybe on the pool, you see it's like slight little movement, you're falling in the water, too far forward, back, mm-hmm. or to the front. And then, of course, it was not until in the late 1700s, not too long ago, if you look about saddle making and human and horse history, where we learned when the horses and riders' sternum align. We know this as bareback riders or as people who grow up with horses, or when we sit on the horse, there's a sweet spot. There's that magic spot. Mm-hmm. That's where we want to sit. So when it comes to equipment, the equipment is just an interface between 2 living beings. So while we have the spine of the horse and the spine of the rider to align, we want to make sure we understand the mature line of the horse. We have many industries in the Western as well as in the English where we start the horses way too young. They only develop to here, which is scary if you think about it. When the shoulder blade, look here, 4 years old, this mm-hmm. is it's developed. And there's many issues we run across. Horses change, they don't have collarbones, and veterinarians dissect horses and show us how detrimental it is to their scapular, the whole back. So today we're going to focus on not just the shoulder freedom and how we're going to fix it. We want to focus on the spine. There's so many wonderful articles coming from veterinarian universities all around the world. And I like to start off by, we talked about this already here, where the rider should sit and how it sits. I want to talk about the top part. I'm going to pick up a saddle here quick, or half of a tree, and you can see how wonderful and wide the bars are. Okay, so there's certain styles of saddle trees in the Western world, or army saddles, or packing saddles. They always kept this nice width through here. And my question is now to you, Dr. Angel, is when we see equipment like this one here, what is so super narrow, okay? We see saddles that cost anywhere from super inexpensive on $200-300 to $14,000 with channels like that.
Mm-hmm.
Their English saddle have a nice wide channel like a Western saddle or army saddle. I understand you working in many different, not just horses, also dogs.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And you're not saying to your clients, oh no, I don't like that type of dog or that kind of horse. You know, for you, you can't.
I see a little bit of everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So why don't you help us a little bit to understand how detrimental it is if we are not protecting the horse's spine, and tell us a little bit what you do. So for your listeners, of course, they know you very well, but I'm so proud to introduce you to our clientele, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about what you do and how your view is from saddles, what sit on the horse's spine.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, thank you so much for having me speak with you today. Definitely, it's a very important subject. But first, for those who don't know me, I'm Dr. Angel. I'm the founder of Holistic Animal Studies through Angel's Animals. And I've been teaching animal body work for a while now, probably about 15 years. But this past decade, the courses have been online. So I've been able to reach a much wider audience. So I do have students in over 40 countries, and I teach a variety of different modalities. I have a degree as a doctor of chiropractic in addition to my veterinary degrees, and I teach a body alignment course that I developed, but I also teach massage therapy, craniosacral therapy, kinesiology, taping. There's a whole number of like acupressure, different things that we cover in our courses. But the main reason that people want to learn this stuff is obviously because the horse is experiencing some kind of pain, right? So they're going to ride their horse or work with their horse, and they notice that the horse is uncomfortable. And sometimes some horses are more obvious than others. Some tend to be more stoic, but it could just be little signs that they're having difficulty with certain movements that they weren't doing before. They're getting a little cranky, and the owner's like, why don't they want to do this? They used to like doing this. And yeah, I mean, the saddle plays a huge role, because if that saddle is not fitting them correctly, or it's, preventing their shoulder, especially in their back, from moving the way that it should, they're going to have pain associated with that. And then what they're going to do is the horse is going to compensate for that pain by altering their movements. And if this holds up over time, you're going to have some pretty significant changes in just the way that their muscles are developing, the way that they're moving, and it can affect the full body. So it's definitely extremely important, and that's where we come in. It's one thing to fix the saddle, which obviously has to happen, but without addressing the body as well, it's a bit difficult.
Yeah.
My dog's drinking water now. So.
Yes. So we follow a philosophy which called Saddle Fit for Life, and I use a lot of slides from Saddle Fit for Life, which is also an online academy. And one of the biggest factors here is we always say there's a lot of factors what goes around the horse's body, nutrition, shoeing, equipment, and like you were talking about, I don't want to put all body workers into one pot. I mean, I can list them all, but there's people who make sure that the physiology of the well-being of the horse, and of course the environment as well. And I like to compare it to a spoke in a bicycle wheel. Every spoke has his job.
Mhm.
But if you just fix one spoke, you can't ignore the rest, like you just said.
Yes.
We have a lot of problems when we at Schlese go out and fit a saddle, and customer wants to buy a saddle, and they think by buying a new saddle, the horse will be wonderful now. And then
Mhm.
meanwhile, we look at the shoeing or the body, and we look at the back of the horse, and we have seen this so many times. It's very, very sad. And of course, you could say, what do you worry about? You're selling another saddle. I always say you're only as good as your client recommends you. So imagine I just sell a saddle and the horse doesn't improve. They don't recommend you. So also in your industry, there's more and more veterinarians who speak out, and they look at the horse's back, either with a thermography or with a deformity in their spine. And I understand you have a doctor in chiropractic as well. I remember when I was showing international, that didn't exist.
Mhm.
Massage or chiropractic horses, right? But what did exist is certain areas where you want to stay away from a horse's back. So this is done. I got that slide from university in Davis in California. So where two vet techs hold a spine up, and you can see, I mean, this inside out. I'm not trying to preach to you through the choir here, but we see how the spinal process is falling back, and then there's very few in the middle that stand up, and then they fall forward again.
Mhm.
And in the saddle fitting world, what I find in old historian books, they always say where the saddle sits is in that green zone. And when we sit bareback, the rider sits at the base of the withers. He has his back and he has his butt. So that's where the rider sits, right here in the center. And what we like, if we look at the riding of old masters, they always says the horses needs to carry himself from underneath, from behind. In other words, the back got to come up, hind leg needs to go underneath,
Mhm.
and then he can lift his thoracic sling to have less problems on his tender little front legs. So if we look at this area here, we got all these dots here, and that's what I really want to focus today on, because if I put pressure on it, the horse will do the opposite of not bringing up the back. It will actually bring it down towards that side. And that, of course, we don't want, because then we all see this issue. Can you tell us a little bit what you find the most challenging in your world when you teach those courses, and that equipment needs to be looked at, but it won't?
Yeah. So when I teach, I always come at it from a holistic viewpoint. So we always talk about saddle fit as one of the things, and not just saddle fit, but also how the rider is riding the horse too. I mean, the rider balance can be very important too, and also the size of the rider compared to the size of the horse. But yes, it's definitely an issue, and unfortunately, backs like what we're looking at in this photo are pretty common in the horse world, which is it's a pretty sad thing. And it can be difficult because a lot of horse owners will have a body worker come out and they want, this kind of one session, fix my horse, everything's good to go. And if you start saying, well, let's take a look at your saddle, let's see what might be causing this, a lot of them are either convinced that their saddle is perfect because they paid a lot of money for it, or somebody told them it was a good saddle. They told them it fits the horse correctly. So it can oftentimes be difficult just to get that owner to even admit that the saddle may be contributing to it. which can be a difficult thing. But that's why I try to educate all of my students and practitioners to be able to look at a saddle and especially show them the difference in movement of how a horse should move versus how they are moving when they have a saddle that's doing basically what we're seeing in the picture here, that's impinging the spine. So
yeah, so I like this one exercise. Way back when, I always seen this as a kid when I watched horses, but it says, show me your fingernails. They happen to be clean in that moment, so I showed them. Go over here and scratch them with your fingernails, as if you scratch a mosquito bite. It says, go a little harder. They're not made out of sugar. And I could watch his lip starts quivering, and I wanted to groom me back.
mm-hmm.
And we all seen that when horses groom.
Yep.
Okay. His lip didn't quiver because I spoke perfectly German to this horse or English or whatever language. It's a reaction. So if I need the horse to carry me easier, better, for him to bring the back up and hind leg underneath, I got to be off the horse's spine.
Mm-hmm.
And yet we have sometimes equipment, you can buy them for $39, those bareback pads. And if you change the wording from bareback pad to treeless saddle, then you can put a 0 behind it because it's a clever marketing. You're still sitting on the horse's spine. The second you pull something over that, you have that pressure. And then sometimes those bareback pads or treeless saddles, whatever you want to name it, or how much you want to pay for it, you put your stirrup leathers onto a hook, right? So if you do light or posting, for example, or you do a jumping or a 2-point cantering, all this pressure is now over the strap with the stirrup bars attached to. So when they invented the tree, it's a great museum in Kentucky. I love that, at Lexington, Kentucky. It's a horse museum. And you see how the European came over, captured the country, and you see some pictures with the natives and the Europeans fighting. 50 years later, same picture, but you see some difference. First, the natives had no saddles.
Mm-hmm.
Second picture, they had all saddles. How come the whole culture, the whole industry, or industry I can't say, but the whole nation, were unbelievable horseback riders, switched to a saddle? Well, they noticed
the horse,
the horses was faster, more eligible, and their aim was much more steady, because when they're standing in the stirrup, right, they can absorb the bouncing in their knees.
Mm-hmm.
If you put that weight then instead of over the strap like you see on these saddles, you will eliminate the pressure on the horse's spine. So your aim is better because the shaking of the horse's back you can absorb, but vice versa, it doesn't translate directly to the horse. Now, don't get me wrong, I do like bareback riding. I had bareback pads too, but we need to keep things in perspective. We have so many different sports, right? Once in a while, hopping on a bareback, I won't kill the horse. But if I ride every day for leisure, pleasure, hobby, Olympics, whatever, I got to be off the horse's spine. And that's how the saddle got invented. And unfortunately, we see too many problems, like you mentioned, the weight of the rider. And we have a saying in Germany, the horse have to be bigger than the rider. And
ideally, that would be the case.
and you say, yeah, of course, that should be the case, Yet we have a lot of horses who are suffering in silence. And that's actually when I wrote my first book, that's how I was calling it. I call it Suffering in Silence. But what we also have to consider, we have a massive change in the breeding society.
Mm-hmm.
We have now horses who are bred not for working anymore so much, more for high sport. We see horses with super long legs, super short backs. I mean, this is a very short back. I'm not looking here. No saddle sits on the croup, hopefully.
Yeah.
So the soldiers call the back area here the ring of lights, the shiny area. Stay off that. So the end of the mane, or look at the shiny area right there, just as a thumb rule, that's much shorter. So if I would have gone to the army 200 years ago, I would have been like Gulliver, the massive, this giant, because people weren't that tall 200 years ago, right? So yes, there was an occasion tall person, but now, if it's in nutrition, if it's the way we evolve as human, the fact the matter is, we are so much bigger people.
Mhm.
You can blame the food industry or the brother Kellogg's who came up with the cereal. Either or, we are heavier in general as the people, and the horse's loading area gets smaller.
Yeah.
Furthermore, with the breeding, we see pictures. I mean, we see young foals, where we see from the breeders, and the same thing happens in the equine industry. What happens with the shepherds, when we have the hip dysplasia, where we see a lot of issues, they need to do a lot of stuff to these overbred horses. And as long as people pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for them, the breeder continue doing that. Fact of the matter is, when we talk about how can we make it the best for the horse, we have to think one thing. There's two beings, the animal and the rider, and the interface is the saddle. And we're going to talk about all 14. Today we just talk about the spine. And we see many, many, many saddles. I'm using this slide here. Many saddles, what go to the right. Okay, and you have to ask yourself, why is it? Is that because people are right-handed and sit higher on the right? Is it because birth trauma? Is it because the appendix on the horse is like on the human on the right side? What is it? The matter of the fact is, anybody who's listening, go to your barn, and if you have more than 10 horses, count them, and then count how many horses' mane is to the right, ungroomed to the right. So if I look at history books written by soldiers or trainers or horse people who've been with horses all the time and put their thoughts to making saddles, like one of your colonels, 1857, McClellan made a saddle. That's the only saddle in the world what is in the Hall of Fame and written in the First and Second World War. He taught his soldiers, I think about that's 160 years ago or 170 years ago, how to use the rigging differently depending on the mane. So all this has been forgotten. And for you, Dr. Angel, you're helping the horse, and okay, I can help him. But if you put the equipment back on, just because somebody said it fits, they don't have that somebody. Then I like to pretty much say 99% of these somebody don't have your education or degree. I'm not just saying it to put honey around your mouth. The fact is that the majority of the veterinarians, especially when they have a degree or a doctor in chiropractic, know more about equine anatomy than a salesman or a saddle fitter. So yet, what I don't understand, how come that people question you? What do you think that is?
I think it's the biggest thing is it's a matter of money, because a lot of these saddles, as you mentioned, they're quite expensive. And when somebody's dropped that much money on a saddle, they want to believe that saddle is, the right one for their horse. So it's oftentimes difficult for them to face the fact that they may have spent a lot of money on something that they shouldn't really be using. So I think that's what it comes down to a lot of the time.
So do you think it's cognitive dissonance?
That what?
You think it's cognitive dissonance?
Yeah.
So I'm going to say, no, it's good. I'm going to say right here, right? So there.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I think that's it. It's also a lot of opinion based. Yeah. Can you imagine you would go out and assess the horse and work on the horse based on your opinion? There's a reason why they hand out the doctor license, and there's a reason why you're going through your training. So for me, after I've been as a horse owner, so a lot of different saddles, fair enough, I was back then sponsored, but in the end of the day, guess what? If your horse doesn't perform, or constantly have issues, at what time will I say, okay, I'm really felt for my horse. I really feel for my horse. And if I'm competitive, I want to win. So even
Yeah.
if you don't want to win and you love your horse over everything, and there is so much papers and research out what shows how we want to stay off the multifidus muscle. I mean, again, I'm not trying to preach to you,
Mhm.
Dr. Bill, but to our listeners, this is a muscle what gives the spine strength and needs to be left alone. You can't poke around it, or the vessels in the vein what comes out on the sides. And you probably seen it that they have now very good ways of operating on kissing spine, even in the barn. And what they're going to do is they come in here and cut them apart. But what they can't do, if this hole down here gets smaller and smaller and pinches the nerve, you can't open that anymore.
No.
So if our ancestors knew the number one thing is we got to stay, if we want the spine to come up, the back to come up, we got to stay off those trigger points. And back to your comment about the money part, I always feel like people don't like changes. We as human beings, we hate changes.
Yeah, they definitely don't.
We only do changes when we're in pain or in fear. And when people hear us right now, somebody else may say, oh, the narrow channel, wide channel is all a fashion. It comes and goes. But what doesn't come and go is if you touch your funny bone. And if you find it or hit it, it goes all the way to the pinky. So we can relate, just like using a fingernail and scrubbing here, and the horse wants to groom your back. We can relate, certain pressure creates a reaction which you may not need or want.
Yeah, most definitely.
So I often found that in the past, because we get there, they say, I've been to all the saddles, I'm running out of money, already spent 3 times over $5,000. I don't have any more money. Just fix my saddle right now. Please don't buy me another money. Right? So I always say, you can continue, ignore what you learn, continue what you do, buy another horse what fits your saddle, or learn how to identify a saddle where you can flip it upside down. There's another old saddle, okay? Right? That has already more space. Is it enough? More depends on skinny or big horses, but at least I have a chance. All right. So I always say there is beautiful saddles in the States, up to $15,000 in Western, and there's other saddles that come from other countries, Western. They have one thing in common. You won't find ever a Western saddle with a narrow channel. The leather goes up, but the bars are always fine.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to say that the majority of body workers or people who work on horses, they do thrive in their business and they do good if they get rid of the costs. Not just keep putting band-aids on. And if I'm thinking what I did to my horse just to keep him going, rather than take the thumbnail out of the shoe. So my good friend of mine, he made the German soccer team, like he's a super soccer player. And if I put a thumbnail in his shoe, he still would outrun me and outplay me. We boys like to grow up in Germany with playing soccer on the road. So, but that thumbnail would alter his step, which will eventually blow his knee and his hip, his back, never mind what it does bleeding-wise and nerve-wise.
Mm-hmm.
So a good athlete, like the horse, will find a way to perform.
Yeah. No, they will. And I think one thing that owners need to realize too, like when you look at a horse with kissing spine, the best way to actually deal with kissing spine is to prevent it. Don't let it happen in the first place. Because then when they're having issues with it and they come to somebody like me and they're like, here, fix my horse. There's things that we can do, to help it. There's things that we can do to increase range of motion and things of that nature. But like you said, you can go in surgically, but you're not going to ever really get rid of it. And you just need to make sure that it's not developing in the first place. We have a volunteer out here, and I tried to talk to her a little bit about body work because she was saying her mother-in-law had a horse that developed kissing spine, and she had to get rid of that horse, and she got a newer horse. And now this horse is young. He's only like, I don't know, 8 years old, and now he has it too. And it's just such bad luck on her part that she keeps getting these horses with it. So I was trying to educate her a bit on you know, things of that nature. But yeah, I mean, people a lot of times they don't put the connection together. They think that it's just kind of like maybe, I don't know, luck of the draw or something, that their horse is getting these issues when they're not seeing how much they're actually contributing to it.
Right. Would you do me a favor and tell me a little bit more about your online courses and how do I go about it? And let me just make sure I got that right slide up. Here we go, so people can see your website. And
yeah, so basically, if they're horse owners, we do have courses for you, and we do have courses for professionals too. So if you're somebody that is already some kind of bodywork professional or just some kind of equine professional, we offer courses where you could start to incorporate these things into your practice or even start a practice doing it. But if you're just a horse owner and you just want to work on your own horses and you want to make sure that they're feeling good and be able to, you know, evaluate them, which is really important, to be able to analyze their gait to make sure that they're moving correctly, palpate them to see if you're feeling, you know, areas that might be atrophy because, you know, the saddle's putting too much pressure on it, or, you know, looking for things of asymmetry in their bodies. So if you want to learn that, we have courses for animal owners as well, where you can learn all of that, learn, you know, some really easy, basic, but super effective bodywork techniques that you can perform at home with your horses, basically. So we have a little bit of everything. We also have like cold laser therapy courses. As I mentioned, we do like craniosacral therapy, kinesiology taping, which is actually a really cool technique that horses do really well with. If people aren't familiar with it, it's that athletic tape that sticks to the skin on people. You'll see it on athletes a lot, but we can actually put that on animals too. And horses do really well with it. And you can put it on their backs and then put the saddle over it. It just helps engage those muscles while they're moving. So there's a lot of things that you can do to definitely help with it. But as we were mentioning before, you need to fix the problem, which in a lot of cases would be the tack, the saddle. But then just doing that, especially if this has been going on for a period of time, the horse is going to be moving differently. They're going to have compensation due to it. They're going to have muscle memory on how to move where it's not painful. And unless you go in there and you actually address the soft tissue and you address the alignment of the spine, you're not going to fix them just by changing the tack. So you really do need to, it's like you were saying too, I mean, you have to look at every aspect of it from a holistic point of view. And a lot of times, you know, even moving differently will affect the hooves too. And you have to look at the horse's feet and how they're being trimmed and things of that nature as well. So it's definitely something, I think when you take these courses, it kind of opens your eyes to a lot of different aspects of what contributes to the way your horse is moving and how they're feeling and their overall well-being.
Yeah. I think I really like what I'm hearing here, because as I was saying earlier, we at Schleser, we follow Saddle Fit for Life, and Saddle Fit for Life Academy down here has over 1,000 students all over the world, and majority of them are either veterinarians or body workers, as an doctor of chiropractic, physiotherapist, osteopath, etc. So they know that quite well, and they look at the equipment so they can talk saddle language and saddle fitting and show the person, listen, this will relate like this on your body, and talk to the saddle fitters. But we also have a lot of saddle companies other than Schleser and saddle fitters who go through this course and they don't have your background or the background of a body worker. So this is great. And for those folks who listen right now, just looking at the saddle is one thing, but to identify, imagine what you could do, not only help them with the equipment, but also learn in one of those courses from Dr. Angel how to properly palpate the horses, and then either I assume there's more than one course in your program that can go either through the taping and through the laser, if they want to continue, or
they can stay busy for quite a few years if they want to.
Yeah.
There's a lot of courses.
And it's everybody whatever they lean towards it, right? So,
yeah. And likewise, also, I have a lot of students who we talk about saddle fit, but a lot of them want to dive deeper into that. So also going to your website and learning a bit more about what you do and how to actually, really fit a horse correctly. That's something that I think they could benefit from too. So
my dream is always if everybody understand how a car works, what the rules of the roads are, so we don't kill each other, and we know how to get the car in gear and how the pedal and the brake works and the indicator, then we have a good basis. So that's what we call a driver license. Of course, you don't need in certain countries in this world a driver license. You just figure out how that unit works and then off you go. But imagine in the equine industry, everybody knows the driver license of, well, I call it the saddle fitting. The driver license of saddle fitting is to identify where should the saddle sit in the pink area. Where should the girth sit? Not on any muscle edges. So even if we just figure that out, that would be huge. And with that, I like to encourage people to turn the saddle upside down and see how wide your spanel is. The thumb rule used to be it should be 10 centimeter wide. If your horse is very, very tiny, very small, you get away with anywhere from 3 inches, 7.5 centimeter to 10 centimeter. With that, I say thank you so much, Dr. Angel, for being part of the first session. I'm looking forward to talk next time about one of the other reflex points. And tune in.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really excited to talk more with you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.